Welcome back into the Daily Dose. I'm Jeff Hansen. As always, the show is brought to you by Give'emHellBrigham.com and by CougarSportsInsider.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. Really important announcement today, new announcement. I'm excited about it. I am weeks away from releasing my first preseason preview magazine. Think of magazines like Phil Steele or like Athlon. That's kind of the idea of what I'm doing, but I'm doing it differently. Instead of previewing every college football team and talking about Kansas in a generic high level preview type analysis situation where we talk about how good Jalen Daniels is, this magazine will be tailored to the BYU fan, and it will be tailored to what BYU has to do in order to stop Kansas and stop the elite quarterback that is Jalen Daniels. It's a preseason preview magazine like a lot of the others, but it's done differently. And to my knowledge, I don't think there's anything like this for BYU fans out there. I'll have more details on where you can buy the magazine, how you can download the magazine. It will be a lot of fun. I'm excited. It will be cheap and affordable for everybody. So more details in the coming weeks. Super excited about that endeavor. And to add that to the coverage that we provide here at the Daily Dose and at Give'emHellBrigham.com. Today, let's talk about BYU and the preseason Big 12 media poll that was released earlier this week. I guess released officially yesterday. BYU checks in at number 11 in the Big 12 preseason poll. And I don't really have a problem with that. If you go down this list, it makes sense. Texas at number 1, you have to. I mean, I know that Texas is always back and that Texas is never back, but I don't know how you can look at the talent that they have on that roster and not at least think that they're going to make it finally work. Maybe this is the year they do it. They have the talent to do so. Kansas State, of course, won the conference last year. Oklahoma, kind of like Texas. I don't know how you bet against them. Texas Tech, I love Texas Tech. I think Texas Tech at 4, they are a dark horse to win the conference for sure. TCU, Baylor have no problems. Oklahoma State, a little bit surprising, but this does feel like a Mike Gundy special kind of year where Mike Gundy is doubted. Everybody has written Oklahoma State off, and Mike Gundy goes out and wins the conference. That's kind of what he's been known to do. UCF is the highest of the newcomers. It's kind of a trendy pick, but I get it. Gus Malzahn has certainly done it at the P5 level. John Reese Plumlee played pretty well last year. There's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about UCF. Kansas, Jalen Daniels is elite. That offense everybody is coming back on that offense. Kansas will be very good. Iowa State could be a rough year. BYU, Houston, Cincinnati, West Virginia. It makes a lot of sense to me. I think that when you look at BYU at number 11, I think BYU fans feel more confident than that. I personally have BYU right there with Oklahoma State, UCF, Baylor in the 6 to 8 range. I think I could see BYU finishing there. And frankly, the difference in the conference with 14 teams in the conference, if you go 4-5, you might finish at 11th. If you go 5-4, you might finish in 7th place. It's pretty tight there in the middle. Why am I a little bit more confident than apparently the rest of the preseason media poll voters? I believe in Jay Hill, but I totally get why you wouldn't believe in Jay Hill. And it really has nothing to do with Jay Hill. If you don't know who Jay is and what BYU is doing or what to expect from them, if you haven't paid attention to Weber State football, you're not going to have a lot of confidence in Jay Hill. So all you're really going to have to rely on is the metrics and the stats from the past. And even when Elisa Tuiaki's defenses were keeping teams out of the end zone and points off the scoreboard, the defensive metrics hated that defense. BYU gave up a lot of yards. They missed a lot of tackles. And from an analytics standpoint, nobody was surprised once the points started to come. People were very surprised when the points weren't there. So the defensive metrics just weigh BYU down a ton. And from a roster standpoint, BYU went heavy into the transfer portal, and it's really kind of hard to account for that. What do you expect from transfers who are brand new to the program and to this scheme? 11 makes sense. BYU also needs more talent. While I think that most of the issues on the defensive side of the ball were related to coaching and not talent, that does not mean that BYU has the requisite amount of talent that they need in order to compete at the upper tier of the Big 12 conference. The Cougars need more talent. Let's look at what that means, though. We could talk about needing more talent all day long, but what does that really look like? Well, let's take Arkansas. I get it. They're not in the Big 12, but they are on BYU's schedule, and they came to Provo last year and just bludgeoned BYU. Arkansas has signed 45 four-star commits since 2019. So in their 2023 roster, that's the bulk of the players. The classes for 2019 on make up the bulk of the roster for Arkansas in 2023. 45 four-stars during that timeline. Some of them maybe didn't pan out. Some have already transferred. Some went to the NFL. But that's the quantity of talent that Arkansas is bringing in every single class. That's about 9 four-stars per recruiting class. I get it if you don't think that 4 stars matter, or if you're not a big believer in recruiting and the star system, okay, but it is the best system that exists today, even if it's not perfect, and 45 4-stars is a lot. BYU, they've signed 24 stars since 2010. Clearly, there is a difference. Nobody's viewing Arkansas as some powerhouse in college football. They're not a juggernaut. But from a talent perspective, BYU is so far behind them. Now, can BYU beat them? Sure, of course they can. And they could go out, they can execute, they can have a good game plan, they can develop players really well. All of those things can still happen. But from a pure, raw talent perspective, BYU is woefully behind a team like Arkansas. Well, okay, Jeff, but they're in the SEC, so that's different. Even Baylor, who I think Baylor and BYU, there's a lot of similarities between the two programs. Baylor, since 2010, has signed 44 4-stars compared to BYU's 20. So more than double. Clearly, BYU needs to bring in more talent. That has to happen. And it starts this year on the recruiting trail. If BYU does not start to capitalize and close the deal on some of these bigger name recruits, then BYU fans need to get pretty comfortable with 11th place in the conference, because that's probably where BYU will get. And the ceiling at that point is probably 7, 8. That's where things go. Without more talent on the roster, knocking on the upper echelon of the Big 12, finishing in the top 4 of the conference, it seems like nothing more than a pipe dream. That's what BYU has to do. Of course, they have to execute and have better game plans and things like that. But I think those are the kinds of things that will get BYU to 10th and 11th place. I think if BYU trotted out the same defense that they had a year ago this year, I would vote them at number 14. I don't see any way that BYU doesn't finish in 14. So scheme coaches, they got BYU from 14 up to 11. And now it's going to be up to talent to get BYU a little bit higher from there. Thank you so much for your support of the Daily Dose. If you haven't done so yet, hit the subscribe button. And until next time, give them hell.